how we can evolve the IGF. We recognise that a decision will be made next year as to the the further mandate of the IGF, but I think in discussions so far at this year's IGF, there seems to be the overwhelming view that multi-stakeholder discussions are a good thing, and I just wanted to note in the DNS Research Federation did a report on the impact of the IGF, and there was a quote to the effect of, if the IGF didn't exist, we would have to invent it. So I think, regardless of what is decided next year, there is a need for this international multi-stakeholder discussions to take place, and we hope that the IGF will continue long into the future. So our discussion today is just seeking some thoughts about how we can evolve the IGF from where it is today so that it can continue to meet the challenges of a digital world. We have 4 speakers with us today, and we have an online moderator as well who will be keeping an eye on the online participation and will let us know if anybody has comments to contribute. My colleague Everton will read them into the meeting for us. So I will let our speakers introduce themselves, and perhaps you can just do that briefly as you speak. But just briefly, we have Chris Buckridge, who wears multiple internet governance hats. We have Renata Miele from .br. We also have another CCTLD represented. We have Plantina from .za. We have civil society represented with Amrita, and our online moderator today is Everton, also from .br. So we're going to ask speakers to just reflect on a few questions, and then I'm hoping that there will be an opportunity for speakers to interact with each other, respond to each other's thoughts, or build on each other's thoughts. But we will start with Amrita, I think, and I'll ask you all. You'll all have an opportunity to respond to the same question. But Amrita, if you would briefly introduce yourself, and then perhaps share your thoughts on how the IGF should evolve to meet the challenges of a modern digital world.
Thank you so much, Annalise. And thank you for having me here. I'm Amrita. I am from India. I work for a civil society organization called CCY. I'm involved in the Asia Pacific Regional IGF, apart from other things. And to respond to your question on how the IGF should evolve to meet the modern digital world, I think it needs to be more focused. It needs to be more empowered. In fact, the working group strategy where Chris, me, Jorge, and many others in this room who are involved, we did create a vision document where there have been certain concrete measures being drafted on how the IGF could evolve to meet most of the requirements which is being portrayed as gap areas. For example, it could be the place where everyone can come and it could be a test bed for people. It could be a place where the GDC's implementations could be tracked. It could also be a place where even governments come and test out what they want to do, etc., apart from other things. So IGF has it in them, has it in itself, but it needs to be more empowered in terms of people, in terms of money, primarily so that it can do what it has been doing, but not formally been given the mandate. I would stop at that.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Amrita. And just before I go much further, in my enthusiasm to begin the conversation today, I neglected to introduce myself, so my apologies to everybody for that. My name is Annalise Williams. I work for the .au domain administration. I'm part of the technical community, and I'm also very involved in Australia's national IGF, and I've been the chair of the IGF for the last 2 years. So my apologies for being so hasty. Chris, perhaps we might go to you. How does the IGF, how should it evolve? And I do want to come back to the point Rita made, but if any of the other speakers wanted to chime in on the points about empowerment in terms of people and money, how the IGF is going to be funded is a live question. But Chris, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, so my name's Chris Buckridge. I'm currently a MAG member for the next 2 days at least. Then we see what happens with 2025. I have a few other hats that I wear, but for the purposes of this, I'm a long-time IGF gadfly who's happy to just sort of throw some comments in as to how things might evolve. I think the important thing is the IGF is and has always been a work in progress. It's never been static in terms of what it is. It probably feels a little, we come back every year and see a lot of the same people, and that's always good and fun. But there has been evolution, and well, full disclosure, I was one of the co-authors of that DNS Research Federation paper. Part of what we found there was, digging back through how it's evolved, what's happened, what the sort of results of those processes have been, was fascinating and really turned up some very interesting examples, both sort of very practical examples, how it sort of helped to foster an IXP development in Africa and other global south countries, how it fostered the NRI, National and Regional Initiative ecosystem, and how important that has proved to be in terms of developing internet governance discussions. But I mean also things like, in talking to different people, hearing some really different perspectives on the impact that the IGF had. Some people sort of saying, when we talk maybe about the IANA transition, yes, it was a hugely important crucible for discussion and ideas to come together. Other people saying, no, well, it was a bit separate to that. So I think, there's lots of perspectives. It has changed and grown over time. And I mean, the intersessional activities are an area where we've been very clear that there has been growth, there has been change in the last 2 decades, and they've evolved into something probably of the almost most value in this IGF space. And that's the best practice forums, which we've had a cybersecurity best practice forum in operation for a good number of years now and has produced some really important and insightful work. We've had a policy network on fragmentation, which has also been now in its 3rd year and has done some really insightful study on a very key issue right now in internet governance. We've also had one on artificial intelligence, which perhaps got a bit subsumed by some of the larger scale UN discussions, but if you read the report, it actually predicted, I guess, what some of the Secretary General's AI panel said in its report about things like regulatory interoperability. So I mean, those ideas are percolating really in a very early state in the IGF, and the IGF is helping to get them to that next level. I think that evolution needs to continue. I think we're at a really fascinating point going into next year where we'll have a quite different context. We'll have a much shorter time frame to prepare. We'll have a different kind of MAG. We may see that there's a need to sort of consolidate a little, to sort of bring it in to a bit more tight focus in how it works. There's obviously going to be an eye to the WSIS Plus 20 review, which will happen a few months after the IGF next year. So I think we want the IGF next year to be at its best, and this a little pressure can force the change that you want and create a diamond. So I hope that's what we're going to see in the coming 6 months in terms of evolution. Obviously, funding is a perennial issue. I do think it's important to be thinking that we maintain the broad base of funding for the IGF. I mean, any multi-stakeholder model, capture by a certain stakeholder group or demographic is a concern, and that applies as much to the UN and member states as it does to any other group. I think that part of the strength is having funding come from lots of different sources, so that the decisions about how the IGF evolves, the decisions about where it goes, have to be taken in a multi-stakeholder way, rather than the person who's outlaid the most cash gets to steer the ship. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, important observations on a number of fronts there. I would agree with you about the need for broad-based funding. I think at the Australian government booth out there, they had a survey asking people to indicate whether they thought their stakeholder group should contribute to funding. So I'll be interested to see what the results of all those surveys were. And just your point on the policy networks and best practice forums, I think that dynamic coalitions, that is also a really important point. The IGF has already demonstrated that it can evolve to meet changing needs, and it has demonstrated that it can do this successfully, and I'm sure it will continue to do so into the future. I might go to you next, Renata, and then Plantina.
Hello, thank you, Annelise. Thank you for inviting me for this interesting, important session about how to evolve in IGF. I will agree with Chris, because I agree the IGF is a work in progress. So I want to emphasize that the IGF is a work in progress, and it has been an important platform for the discussions about the internet, its applications, and the impacts of the new economic models and services for users and also societies. And maybe if some governments and other decision-making organizations had more involved with IGF, some of the things we are saying now, they are knowing previously, because we discussed this a lot. So I think we are doing a good work, seeking best practice, the new fora. I think all this is important. But in my point of view, it isn't enough. And we are at a moment where we can no longer afford to gather and deepen discussions on critical global issues without taking a step forward and using these debates to develop a set of consensual proposals and recommendations to present to multilateral organizations. It's necessary to improve mechanisms for building consensus and producing guidelines and recommendations in such a way that communities' voices have an impact on multilateral and other decision-making processes, so that these effective solutions to challenges we face can be found and implemented. We need to demonstrate that there is no contradiction between strengthening multi-stakeholder spaces and processes and the role of multilateral spaces. We are in this crazy moment that we are something against another, and we have to stop this and work together in a complementary way. So, in my opinion, that's why evolving the IGF is a core discussion for us. And we need to have the courage to look to what we have achieved till now together, and together we need to build new ideas. We need to step out of our comfort zone and think about how to make the IGF a space that is seen as relevant for shaping guidelines in digital policies. This is our challenge, in my point of view, to transform the IGF in such space, in such a space, we need to deepen transparency and strengthen multi-stakeholder participation mechanisms. And we already have a good start point, and this point is the São Paulo Net Mundial guidelines. We are beginning the process of a review on WICIS Plus 20, and in 2025 we will have the IGF in June, some weeks before the high-level meeting in Geneva. So I would like to bring a constructive challenge, nothing new because Chris in set point put this, how we are going to organize the next IGF in June, like we did till now, or maybe trying to look to this opportunity to think differently and try something new by applying the São Paulo guidelines to build the next IGF. So that's my initial proposal. I believe in the update proposed by Net Mundial, which challenge multiple sectors to jointly think of solutions for the current internet challenges. And maybe we can build experiment with the next IGF, and maybe this is be important to all the WICIS process in these regards. Thank you.
Thanks, Renata. I think it's definitely a time to be creative right now, and what you were saying about the versus multi sort of setting against one another. I was in one of the sessions yesterday, and somebody sort of said multi-stakeholder and multilateral are two sides of the same coin, and that was something that resonated with me. I think we certainly need both. It's not an either or. And you know, each process, you know, like these multi-stakeholder discussions are very much enriched by having government participation on an equal level, and you know, there is a lot of expertise that from the technical community and from other civil society that can be very useful for multilateral processes. So we'll go to Plantina, and then we've had Jorge join us as well since we started, but I'll go to Plantina, and then if you wanted to offer some initial observations, or you can wait till the next round if you like, Jorge. Go ahead, Plantina.
Thanks, Annalise. Thank you, everyone. Let me start also by introducing myself. My name is Plantina Mugoni. I am the Internet Governance Coordinator for the ZA Domain Name Authority. I also serve as the Secretariat for the South African Internet Governance Forum Multi-Stakeholder Committee, amongst other things that I do in my personal capacity. And just agreeing with Chris, I think we're all going to agree with Chris in the sense that the IGF is a work in progress. I think that a lot has been achieved from the time that I've been here and just witnessed, just the level even of participation, I think a lot more still needs to be done. Just also agreeing with my colleague. There's a lot more that needs to be done. We need funding. However, one of the biggest things I think that remains an issue is that what happens to the discussions and the that we have at IGF? What does our document, what does the IGF document turn out to do? We talk about, I appreciate the fact that the multi-stakeholder forum, the multi-stakeholder model that's followed in IGF is a bottom-up approach. We solicit inputs from different stakeholders, but what happens to those inputs? What do they lead to? What actionable items or actionable documents do they lead to? Because really, if they lead to nothing, all this is a talk show. We need more funding for a continuous talk show. And I think, yes, multi-stakeholderism does emphasize that all parties within the multi-stakeholder model are equal, but in reality, government is a decision maker. We are not all equal. Government makes decisions. So we need to bring them into a discussion, negotiate with them. I think maybe that's another element that we need to bring into IGF, is to negotiate, because the internet, as it's evolving, affects all of us in our individual and our business capacity. So I think how the IGF can evolve is just really turn the discussions that we have within the IGF space into actionable items at continental level, at regional level, but also at country level. You know, and see how that works itself out. But really, just I think one of the things that does bother me with how we've been moving for the past couple of years is that we talk, and how does that translate into actionable items in individual countries? So maybe just have that as one of the action points, just moving into next year in the WSIS Plus 20 review. Thank you.
Thanks, Plantina. And we are going to sort of get into, I hope, we'll get into a bit of discussion, and you know, we may not come up with any solutions today, but I'm hoping that we can put forward some ideas and you know, perhaps discuss these again, or come up with a proposal for the Norway IGF, and have some further discussion on them. But Jorge, did you want to sort of offer any reflections on how the IGF could evolve, or you know, do the processes need to change? Did you want to respond to anything that any of the other speakers have said? We've had some comments about governments make the decisions. I think that is, while it's true, nationally they make laws, and internationally they can make treaties. But you know, a lot of the infrastructure is owned and operated by parties that aren't government entities. So, any thoughts you would like to throw into the mix, Jorge? And please introduce yourself as you.
Thank you so much, Annalise. Jorge Cancios, Swiss government. So happy to be here. Happy for the invite to share some thoughts. Maybe a thought that is important is that sometimes we love so much our baby, our IGF baby, that we just look at the IGF baby and how it has to walk and talk and start to run and everything, and we forget that it's a larger family. So, and this WSIS family has more members. Each and every one has his or her role, and really the WSIS architecture is not just some dead letter documents of 2003 and 2005, where some older people like myself participated negotiating. No, it's really a system that is working, that is delivering for the last 20 years, where we as the global community, and not just member states, but also private stakeholders, civil society, academia, the technical community, have invested millions of hours of work, millions of dollars of any other currency in making the vision of WSIS a reality, more connectivity, e-health, whatever that was the old terminology. Everything had an E, or also human rights. Many issues were already considered then. So we have to see the IGF in that context, in the wider context, where we have the action lines from WSIS giving guidance to the UN agencies and to many other actors to do stuff on the ground, changing the reality, really delivering on the SDGs for the people. And we have the WSIS Forum, where we get together each year to hear what has been done to implement the action lines. We have the CSTD, where we discuss, okay, what was the progress and what do we feed up into the UN system? And there we have the different roles. Then it gets very intergovernmental, it goes to ECOSOC, and if somebody doesn't know what ECOSOC is, it's the Economic and Social Committee. It's like the non-war, non-peace twin brother of the Security Council, and from there it goes up to the UNGA, to the UN General Assembly. Those are all parts of this WSIS family, of this WSIS architecture. And the IGF is like the more innovative kid. It's the kid where we talk about new things, we invent new things, policy networks, emerging topics, but we still have to deliver. As Plantina was saying before, we have to deliver, and there are things we have on our mandate for almost 20 years, like delivering recommendations. But it was a problem because, okay, it's nice to have that in the mandate, but we didn't know how. How do we do this? And there was also fears. So if somebody pops up with a recommendation, how was it that that recommendation was developed, etc. So I think this were the relevance, for instance, of the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines kick in, because they tell us, okay, yeah, multi-stakeholder is not anything that is labeled as multi-stakeholder. It's really something that complies with certain guidelines, and those guidelines are, for instance, inclusivity, and not just inclusivity with an open door where only the well-resourced pass the door. No, it's inclusivity in a material, a substantive sense. That's in guideline 1 of the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines. And it's also process steps. It's really getting everybody who is relevant together. It's consulting with the community, and it's really explaining what has been done with the inputs in the, from the community, avoiding this black box problem we've seen in other processes. It's really giving the community also a role in being able to adapt the outputs, etc., etc. It's a lot of guidance that our dynamic coalitions, our BPFs, our policy networks could get inspiration from and start delivering those recommendations we have in our mandate. So looking back, if we look at the IGF as part of this wider family, maybe, for instance, those recommendations could each and every year be addressed then by the UN agencies when they are updating their working plans in the action lines. And then, Plantina, if I may address you, then we would know, okay, we've made a recommendation on data governance. And that data governance recommendations goes to action lines X, Y, Z. And then later on they can report at the WSIS forum on what they did and addressing, reflecting on the IGF recommendations. If we think the IGF as part of a system, it makes much more sense, and then it is no longer in the perception, because for me it's not a talk shop, it's much more than that. But also in the perception of everybody, it would become much more effective, much more impactful if it's really part of a working WSIS structure. And I talk too much, sorry.
Thanks for that, Jorge. I just wanted to sort of touch on a couple of things that you said. You know, firstly about the thinking about the IGF, admiring our baby. I think that is, you know, sometimes the conversations do get around, you know, to focusing on the IGF and sort of only the IGF and not the broader system. I think for me personally, anyway, it's not so much the IGF, but it's the principle of multi-stakeholder conversations and sharing of, you know, exchanging of views, and doing that sort of globally, sort of hearing from, you know, parts of the world that are far away from where you might live or where you might work, and the IGF is a good platform for hearing about the concerns that, you know, might be very different from your own. And also, I think we do need to sort of really focus on the that connection to the SDGs, and the WSIS process was, you know, all about development, and I think it's, you know, important that we all not, you know, the internet is recognised, and, you know, digital technologies are recognised as you know, an enabler of you know, sustainable development. But I think it was Doreen on the first day, sort of something like a third of the world's population still aren't connected. So, you know, we can have one set of conversations, you know, in one place, but in other parts of the world, they're having very different conversations. People aren't connected. And I was in a session yesterday where they were, you know, talking about not having electricity all of the time. So, you know, even if they have the internet, they, you know, don't have enough power for data centres, or can't access the internet all of the time. So I think that is, you know, making sure that the conversations and making sure that the space to have consideration of the issues from everybody's point of view, and make sure that it's, you know, that the needs of those in less connected parts of the world aren't sort of left out of the conversation. I did also want to ask for views, and I'll just ask for a volunteer, I guess. I think, you know, the need for governments and for technical stakeholders, you know, technical experts, private sector, civil society, the need for meaningful conversations to take place. You know, there is a real need, but there is perhaps not always the stakeholder balance here at IGF conversations, at IGF meetings, to sort of have those conversations. So I wondered if anybody has any ideas or any suggestions for how the IGF could sort of better facilitate conversations between governments and other experts. Does anyone want to address that first?
I think what Chris mentioned, that the focus, for example, for IGF may be much more sharper. You have the parliamentary track, but are you actually discussing things which the parliamentarians want to hear? You know, there could be certain things where they may want to discuss, but they may, in a public forum, may be shy to ask or understand. Are we having those kind of, you know, I would say innovative approaches to bring them so that they see value in coming here and discussing things, or also clarifying their doubts as well as sharing their experiences. I think an innovative approach would be good. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a situation, and perhaps showing value to people coming, as in, I'm sure the MAG always has been trying to get the right kind of speakers to come from different stakeholder groups to speak. But sometimes traveling is a challenge. You can't fund travelers. You know, not everyone has deep pockets. Many private companies also may not come to speak because they are afraid of, you know, what they would say and how it would be interpreted. So I think there are multiple issues which would have to be addressed, but I think more focused approach, innovative ways of having discussions, lesser ones, because unfortunately nearly 2/3 of the sessions which happens at the IGF is not in the MAG's hand. If the MAG was to design it, perhaps it may have been done differently, and others can respond to it.
Thanks, Amrita. Does anybody else want to go ahead, Chris?
Sorry, I said that without really thinking too ahead of what I was going to say. Look, I mean, I think we have good speakers, I think, in a lot of the sessions, and we are trying to be innovative in how we plan sessions. And I think, you know, that extends to remote speakers and better integrating them. And I think we need to really focus sort of on the IGF as a hybrid event. This needs to be a space where, you know, you don't need to be there in person to have a meaningful role and take a meaningful part. But that said, obviously, I mean, we know that people being there in person is a different experience. It provides not just the opportunity for, you know, to look around at your fellow speakers on the table and respond in a more organic way, but also to have conversations in the corridor, to meet people in bilateral meetings. There's a richness there. So I mean, we need to still focus on bringing people to the venue and making it an appealing and attractive event to have people at. Now, I think that's, you know, increasingly a challenge, partly because we do have this proliferation of venues. Next year only serves to highlight that, where we have the WSIS Forum 1 week, 2 weeks after the IGF. 2 weeks before the IGF, we have an ICANN meeting, which will have a lot of similar stakeholders there. So I mean, next year is probably unusual, but maybe not that unusual given the trend and the way we see this developing. I mean, if we look at the last 5 years, the pace of, you know, regulation, of new bodies, of new initiatives at the UN level, at the sort of regional level, at the national level is remarkable. It really has, I don't know if anyone's done a line chart of it, but it would be almost exponential, I'm sure, in the increase. So we need for the IGF to carve its own space there where it's actually competing for attention against all of these other spaces. And that, I think, leads just back to the first question of how do we evolve it to better meet the needs and wants of people. And there is a hunger for, you know, some more link to decisional developments. Not that the IGF can take the role of government, not that it can sort of step in and it would fail if it tried, I think. But it does need to be producing much more effective interfaces to the governmental processes, to the regulators, to legislators. So yeah, having a parliamentarian track is a very fundamental element of that, and I think a recognition of the need to build that interface. Whether it's perfect or not yet, I don't know. Probably, yeah, like everything, a work in progress. But that sort of evolution needs to continue, I think. So yeah, stop there.
Thanks, Chris. And I see Renata wanted to add on to that, and I will after Renata has spoken. But if anyone wants to think about, like, how do we make it more appealing and more attractive, particularly to those governments who, you know, might come once and...
Okay. First of all, I apologize. I didn't present myself in the first round, so I am doing now. I'm Renata Miele. I'm the chair of the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, CGI.br, and also a special advisor of Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation. Well, I think this question is connected to the previous one, because why a government or a deputy, a parliament, come to IGF? What can we offer to them to make it interesting, important to be here discussing with us? And for me, we do marvelous debates. We do interesting workshops. We have maybe the best minds that are thinking about the internet, their applications, their impacts on social and economic levels, and everything else. But why governments come here to talk with us? And for me, they will feel the needs to be here if we can deliver something concrete that have some more impact in terms of discussions. We are not going to be ourselves the decision-making process, but they need to see in us, in IGF, in the community, a locus, a space relevant enough to inform and collaborate with recommendations and concrete outcomes that can impact in decision-making process. So if we don't do this, they are not going to come. because there are a lot of spaces to go and more relevant for them. So I think this, I don't have the precisely magical answer to this question, but I think the start point is that how to make IGF more relevant to the people who has the role to make make decisions. So for me, this is the start point.
Thanks, Renata. Plantina, did you want to add something?
Yes, I did. I don't know. I think too highly of the Internet Governance Forum. I really, let me just start off by saying that. I think all the discussions that I've been in while I've been here or in the Internet governance space are relevant. They're well informed, and they inform government. I mean, we provide so many. They have parliamentary trackers. There's best practice, sessions where we exchange knowledge and ideas on how to implement certain things, or how to structure certain guidelines and frameworks. So I think much of the discussions that we are having on internet governance are relevant to them. They make policies that affect our well-being with regards to the evolution of the internet. I think Chris said it. Everybody that's at ICANN, that's at ITU is also here, and all in a multi-stakeholder model, following a multi-stakeholder model. So I don't know if there is anything we can do beyond this to make it more attractive and appealing to them, because really we are discussing things that affect them, that affect how they regulate us, that affect socioeconomic, that have socioeconomic development implications, so I think what I was going to say is that the discussions that we have at our annual IGF meetings need to go on beyond MAG structures. We have multiple communities and sessions, and they need to go on, and maybe then that sits on us as NRIs or national initiatives to take back reports back to them and say, we discussed this, but there's really not much we can do to make it, because everything we're discussing is relevant to them. It affects them. It affects their ability to make decisions. I don't know if we want to dress it like a Christmas tree next time so that it's more appealing. There's no way we can do that. I think highly of the discussions that we have here. I make notes. I have 4 books full of notes just from each session that I've been in. They've been bilateral meetings. There's just a lot of things. It allows for a lot of things. If you want to have bilaterals, there's a section, there's a parliamentary tracker, ministers are here, there's networking opportunities. I don't know how else we need to dress the IGF like a Christmas tree to make it more appealing. I think it is very important. The discussions that we have are very relevant to them. I think there's maybe a need to induct them more into IGF. Maybe it's a lack of awareness of IGF and the importance of it. So maybe, we just had, most countries have just gone through the election, so there's a new government or a new minister, so there's a need to maybe induct them into IGF, and assuming that the ministry hasn't yet done that already, but having the stakeholders that are relevant to IGF speak to them about IGF, stakeholders that are involved in IGF processes, speak to them about IGF processes. I think that's the best we can do at this point.
Thanks, Plantina.
Chris wants to jump in there.
I see that. I will let Chris jump in, but I did want to just flag, you said something about the national and regional IGFs, and so part of this discussion was do the IGF processes need to change somehow? So does there need to be some sort of mechanism through which national IGFs and the global IGF sort of feed into each other and
So this is my understanding of the NRIs, right? And as somebody that coordinates from a South Africa level, we have our national IGF ahead of the regional IGF and the Africa IGF and the global IGF. We write a report that we submit to the 3 structures, right? So it feeds the processes that it needs to go up through our minister's office. I don't think that should change, because the reality is that each region has its own unique challenges, and that speak to that. So we need to also speak to regional issues, and then take those regional issues up to global. That structure should not change, because SADC issues and Europe issues or Africa issues are totally different. But when we get to global, there's best practice platforms where we exchange on a continental level, on a regional level, of how things could potentially be better or how things could work. Maybe I'm just thinking of it from how practical it is for me in coordinating IGF and what I think I feed into, the bigger global picture. But that can't change, because I also speak to our regional issues. I also speak to our continental issues. My report submitted supports those dialogues that they have that address our issues, and then that report goes up into a global report. Yeah.
Thanks, Plantina. Chris, go ahead.
Sorry, I know I'm jumping back into here. Well, first, actually, I want to say to Plantina, I think that's a really important point. On the flip side, sending a report is wonderful. We on this side need to do something with that report. So what does that get? How does that get translated? And I think at the moment, the IGF does not have a good sort of idea of how to do that. The other thing, the Christmas tree idea, dressing it up as a Christmas tree. The thing that has frustrated me for many years about the IGF, and that I actually think the more we talk about it, the more value. There is such a wealth of information in the archives of 20 years of IGF. We have videos, there's so much there. Most of it's on YouTube, but it's not in any usable form. And we have tools, we have methods that we could pull out data, pull out summaries, pull out this is how many discussions there were of GDPR. These were some of the key themes that were talked about in relation to data governance. If there are people with deep pockets out there listening, hello. That would be my Christmas wish for the IGF, would be to someone really and it has been tried before. There was a Friends of the IGF project which worked for a while, and I think then kind of floundered, and it was a very good step in the right direction. I would love to see that, because it is so much information, and it would be so valuable in selling the IGF, in bringing people into understanding what the IGF does, in giving them an insight into the different views of stakeholders. There is so much there, and we're not using it, and that's my concern and my hope.
Even the reports.
Any wish for the...
My
Thanks,
wish.
Chris. Jorge, I'll come to you in a minute, but Everton has indicated that there is a comment in the online.
Not online exactly, but I would like to take this opportunity just to invite, as Chris was saying, was talking about the hybrid IGF, so to take it to take this opportunity to talk about the hybrid IGF, I would like to talk that we have an audience already watching us, and so they are invited to present us with comments, but we have one comment, one raised hand in the room, but through Zoom, which is Jordan.
Can I go to Jorge first, and then I'll come to Jordan? And I saw someone, I'll come to you too.
So Jorge Cancio, Swiss government again. No, it was a very short two fingers. I understand that it's very difficult to navigate all that IGF information if we take the position of the 2015 technology. But nowadays, couldn't we train a bot, an IGF bot, and you ask what's the IGF ideas, information on this? It isn't that difficult. I'm in another life. I'm also a civil rights activist in my country, and we've done that with no money, with no means, and it works perfectly. You can train it. Why don't we do that?
So Everton, perhaps we can pass the microphone to Jordan, and then
Wout. Thanks. Oh, that's weird. Thanks, Annalise. Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Carter. I'm a colleague of Annalise at the Australian Domain Administration. This is a personal view. Rather than a Christmas tree, I think that there is room for some session types that we don't necessarily have at the moment. One of them that keeps coming up in my mind is being able to engage people on a draft piece of legislation or something. So almost like a legislative or a regulatory workshop, where some group, it doesn't have to be a best practice forum, it could simply be a workshop proposal or some legislative testing category of session we don't have yet. Just gives someone, it might be a country, it might be a group of activists, a way to bring a legislative possibility to the IGF community for input, and then to take on board all the input they get here and then to share it out afterwards. So I think some session type innovation. Another might be, you know, how many of us have sat in IGF sessions and really hoped there would be an argument and there wasn't because everyone agreed on everything? Or there's the start of a really interesting argument that only emerges in the last 10 minutes of a 2-hour panel because the people on the panel didn't spend enough time prepping to know that they disagreed with each other. So I think even within the current framework, there's the chance for more effort and more organizing to be done. To do that, one of the IGF reforms that needs to happen is that this insane process where no one is in charge of the program needs to finish. I've done 1 year on the MAG. I've had my thank you and goodbye letter. Who knows what's happening next time? But the MAG does about 1/3 of the program. And so 2/3 is by either a national government or by the Secretariat. There are multiple sessions on the same topics with almost the same angles and 400 sessions. What if there was 100 sessions covering pretty much the same topics, but with 4 times the amount of brain power that was going into them to actually generate something savvy and interesting? And then the third point I guess I'd make is echoing the point about resources. This is, governments say, the premier space for multi-stakeholder engagement and dialogue, and then governments provide enough resources for 5 staff members. It doesn't add up. Like, you know, with a bit more resource to do analysis and communicate the resources that are generated through the IGF process, there could be so much more value arising from the community effort that comes here. And governments are primarily responsible for the overall digital policy architecture. It would be nice if they put a tiny little bit more money where their mouths were on that front. Hopefully none of them was too offended by any of that.
I don't know that they were. I would just ask: should it only be governments that contribute to the funding of the IGF? That's something to think about. We will go. And then that's it. Okay, so here.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Wouter Natris. I'm a consultant in the Netherlands, but also representing the Dynamic Coalition on Internet Standard Security Safety here in Riyadh. I think part of what I want to say was just covered by Jordan, so thank you, Jordan. I hear a lot of things being said right now in the past half hour, and the only thing I can point to that in 2017 and 18 I wrote 2 reports that were presented to the MAG where are all sorts of recommendations how the IGF could be strengthened. And we're talking 6-7 years later about the same ideas. Read the report, it's on the IGF website, and see what we can do with it. One of the examples is exactly, we have 10 sessions on AI, on human rights, on women's rights. All these brilliant people sit in individual sessions. Why not put them together in a room for a day and say, but you're going to come out with recommendations, a toolkit and guidelines, and you're going to present them a day later. Instead of having 10 sessions with perhaps 5 times the same people talking on the same topic. Where's the added value? Because we have brilliant people. 2, what Jorge said on the demo coalitions and output, as an IGF, we do need to start organizing around that output. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, I know, but this output is there. If you were in the main session this morning, you heard what these dynamic coalitions are doing. We are delivering the output, but we're not doing anything. I could not even present my report on the IGF website because it was broken, they said. So where do you go with working for a whole year, A, not being able to present it because you don't get the time, and B, not be able to put it on the website? So what are we doing this effort for? And that's where things are broken, and that needs to be changed. And the funding thing, that I think that a lot of governments should start stepping up, but that we're saying that for years as well. I think you're going to pass it on to that side. So Desiree, I think.
Go here and then on this side.
Yeah, Desiree Milosevich. I'll be very brief. And also agreeing with some innovative ways of making the IGF works more inclusively with the national IGFs and regional IGFs. I don't think we have seen a collective output of what they need, and that they have been able to transfer that even to the MAG, let alone the Secretariat. Whether it's commitment to work on the IGF for next 10 years or some kind of joint output. But also in terms of this innovative ways, governments do get a lot of benefit, I believe, out of the IGF. They might have a separate governmental track, but they also have a lot of bilateral meetings that we other stakeholders are not part of. But I think there's a lot of value in gathering. Lastly, something that's been mentioned is this discussion of legislative proposals from region. What I've witnessed here is the Arab region has worked really in sync to look at the issues in their region. So maybe wherever the IGF takes place, this regional community should come together and have these focus maybe workshops, like Wood was just saying, working in a less workshopy way, but for longer hours. Anyway, I'll stop here for the sake of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Desiree. We'll go here, then here, and then I did want to have turn the conversation around to the Net Mundial guidelines. You may go ahead.
Masanobu Kato from IGF Japan, and I'd like to explain some of the experiences we had last year. You remember that we had IGF Kyoto, which was very popular, and we had many crowds there. And Prime Minister spoke, and 3 ministers came and talked about their policy on digital society. Very interestingly, major newspapers like Nikkei newspaper had a report on Prime Minister attended the International AI Conference or something like that. I'm not specifically criticizing any particular press or so. That was a general impression of the people. This means that the IGF is not very well known to the public. This is very important. People here knows what IGF is, and we are talking about an improvement of IGF. But the other angle is to look at the people who do not know this and do not know the real value, and we have to be very active on getting more interest from those people. One other example, and I found this very interesting. I met with an AI expert in Japan who came to Kyoto conference and asked him why. He said his counterpart in UK or Europe invited him. So that means there are vast majority of experts who do not know the IGF, but who are having international collaborations, meetings, and they say, oh, IGF is not a place to make any decisions. They don't know how to deal with this, very, special issues they're, working with. That's not the case. Bring them in some way. And the one, suggestion is, like Desiree said, focus more on the NRI. And NRI within Japan, we started to invite more experts, having periodical meetings, discussing on specific issues. If we invite government, for instance, in such kind of places, we can probably get their interest more, and they may even think, well, let's see what's going on in the world, what going on in the annual IGF meeting, and that's the only way I think we can get more interest from other people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Barata Mia from Girl Hype Women Who Code South Africa, and I organize Women in IGF Summit every year for the past 3 years. I want to talk about the experience because I listened to comments prior, And maybe my experience will clarify why some things took a different turn. I was invited by the Secretary General of the UN in 2019. There was a group of us, I think there was 5 women who were invited across the world. And that was because prior to that, women had been saying there's no women's voice in IGF. There isn't meaningful contribution of women's voices. Their workshops are being declined, and they do not know how to fill in forms, and the UN had to do something. Hence, we were brought in. And that was in Germany, thanks to the German government, because they made sure we are there. And after that, I had learned so much about policies and how to contribute to the space, and I never stopped. I'm coming and I started knowing how to write workshops. And that has become a main thing that we discuss on the African NRI. So if you say there's 400 sessions with lots of voices saying the same thing, it's purely because they're facing a challenge of who to decline, and if they decline and they say, according to them, these are good sessions as the MEC, then they might find that they declined lots of Africans, lots of women, and for diversity and equity, they need to find out how to balance it and how to get the right perspective. Maybe your suggestion of saying, put all of them in one room and come up with a proper solution might be the best solution, but to reduce the number of sessions, it's going to take the IGF backwards. We're going to lose what the IGF has worked so hard to bring into the space, which is youth and women.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just writing that down so I don't forget. So I have heard, several times that focusing or a deeper focus on the issue rather than multiple sort of surface level discussions might be useful. And we had the observation that under the current sort of program design, there isn't a single sort of source in charge. So that perhaps that's something that we do need to think about, how we design the programs in the future, and how we do have the space for actual solving problems, or at least coming to a genuine understanding of where all the differences of opinion are, instead of just sort of talking about the issues at a surface level. And in terms of outputs of multi-stakeholder meetings, Renata, earlier this year we had the Net Mondiale, which did come up with a multi-stakeholder output in the guidelines that could be useful for other processes. So I wondered if we could perhaps start with you about whether or how those the Net Mondiale guidelines could be applied in the IGF context or other contexts as well.
Thanks, Annelise. Just before answer your question, I think this we have a good discussion. This is a very good debate about the programming, because reduce the number of the sessions maybe has an impact on diversity, but in another way, it's so frustrating and exhausting. Try to follow for all the panels that are, we got very crazy, to be very honest. So this is a very good point. I think MAG has, the new MAG, because we are going to be a new MAG, maybe needs to go deeper in this discussion about how to improve programming, maybe build some consultations for the community. I don't know. I don't have the answer. But I have the question. About guidelines and Net Mundial Plus 10 guidelines, I think we have. I think we need to start on these guidelines, but we need to not to just look to the guidelines and try to fit all that points to IGF or in the regional IGFs. But I think we need to start to discuss how and what guidelines we need to start, because there are a lot of good ideas and propositions in that guidelines regarding how we can guarantee a more diversity and equal participation of all the stakeholders, and how to do this, because we put the idea but we don't say how and how to do this. And I think there are a lot of things we have to think about it. For example, a very simple one, to come to IGF, we need to speak English, because there is another language to talk, to participate. And this is, for a lot of countries, this is a very, very, very restricted point. In Brazil, we don't have a lot of people who speak English in civil society, even in academia, even in private sector. There is no natural. So that's one point. We say internet needs to be multilingual, needs to have language diversity. How can we do this on IGF? It's something that occurs to me now, because to guarantee diversity, we have to think about what we need to, what the gap you need to fill. This is one, for example. The problem with foundings, the cost for traveling and staying, it's another. Maybe the hybrid format is an answer, but it's a part of an answer. It's not the totally. I think we need to do some work in understand what kind of outcome the IGF can deliver. Because we say we need to have something, but what is this something? We don't do this job on Net Mundial Plus 10, for example. We say we need an outcome, we need something more concrete. But what is this thing, some more concrete on the IGF to be produced as our outcome that have some impact? We are going to choose an issue to each IGF, maybe, I don't know. Let's talk about artificial intelligence to put something in outcome, or let's talk about, I don't know, data governance, I don't know. How can we build that? We are going to make previously consultations for the community about some kind of ideas. I don't know. So I think to apply the Net Mundial guidelines to the IGF, I think we need to do some homework. And this is a new challenge for all of us. That's my previously, that's what I see.
Thanks, Renata. And I'm just sort of listening, listening to you speak about the language challenges, and sort of thinking about the programming issues. Perhaps there is something there to better coordinate the program of the global IGF with the national and regional, so at least on some issues everybody can be having the same conversation in their region, in their language, and maybe there is something about putting forward a view for global discussion, the positions on that issue from, or the thoughts from those regions on a particular issue to be discussed here. I think we had a question or a comment at the back.
Just in response to Renata, Anriette Esterhuizen from APC. Just very quickly, we had a similar session earlier today that looked at also Net Mondial, Global Digital Compact, and IGF. And someone from the Swiss government, who's not called Jorge, made a very good suggestion about applying the Net Mondial guidelines about how you scope an issue, and then you identify who's affected by that issue, who are the stakeholders. But there are other guidelines as well within the Net Mondial. But she suggested that we look at the IGF messages and how the IGF messages are produced and then distributed using relevant bits of the Net Mondial guidelines. And I thought that was such a good, practical, concrete suggestion.
Thanks, Henriette. I think we have another comment. Was it online or somebody else wanted to speak? Okay, go ahead.
Oh, hello, thank you. My name is Galvanian Bach, Civil Society. I also do have a practical suggestion. As an attendee, the experience using digital tools is quite difficult. I believe you could focus more on the hybrid format because many people cannot afford to travel, but provide them a great experience. Creating an account is difficult. Browsing the schedule is difficult. Finding the speakers are difficult. Finding the Zoom link is difficult. So we did an event a couple of weeks ago on Zoom events.zoom.us. It was extremely user-friendly. Maybe using that platform as a test could prove useful, and you might have like many more people joining because the IGF is an incredible and unique forum. The first time I came in, I was like, I didn't believe my eyes. It was so good. But also now I feel frustrated because, finding content like the resources is extremely difficult. And maybe you do not have the money to do what you want, but you've got a tremendous wealth of knowledge, of people, and of resources. So leverage your community. See what you do have in terms of people and what they can do, and maybe we can create a platform altogether and apply the principles that we say are good for the future of the internet. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to?
It was a very brief comment, I think. Kind of drawing on what Henriette said and on Jordan's comment before about evolving, innovating in sort of formats. I mean, we have an IGF which usually has several sub-themes. It could be that we look at each of those sub-themes in a sense as a different, distinct conference with its own modalities. So if you had, for instance, a data governance sub-theme in a year where there was a need or a desire to produce some sort of output like the equivalent of the Sao Paulo guidelines, that could be the focus of that theme. Whereas another theme like AI or whatever could be more traditional IGF, but freeform. So I think there are possibilities there if we sort of think in terms of different formats.
Thanks, Chris. And just in terms of the language issue, Amrita, do you have any views? You're very involved in the Asia Pacific IGF. Anything you'd like to share?
So I think language is an issue, as Renata mentioned. It is at a regional level also. In Asia Pacific, it's more complicated because you have so many languages. It's just not one, two. Even in a country, you may have 22 languages for that matter. So it's difficult. Again, resources is a challenge when we have, documents which are produced and then even getting it translated. But I think with technology improving, the translations may be cheaper, if not absolute accurate, but at least you can get the essence and some people can look at it. So I think those can help. I think that's important. Another thing, Chris, while, I do get your point about one topic, I also draw on it what topic may be of importance to many parts of the world may not be for some people. So obviously a nice balance would be good enough out there. The other thing about the, I wanted to point, because we were speaking about the NRIs, and that's a huge achievement for the IGF. We kind of tend to forget it. We go to the countries which were not, least developed countries having, NRI initiatives. And I'm talking from Pacific, Asia Pacific. We have the Pacifics doing, you have the small countries like Nepal doing, landlocked countries. You also have Afghanistan where you cannot have it. They are having it in hybrid mode. They recently had the Afghan IGF and NOG. So I think it gives the empowerment also, like in places like Afghanistan where you can't do things, where an IGF is held. We sometimes lose that what it is triggering. They're talking about the SDGs, they're talking about their national goals, which we forget. Obviously, they feed on to the IGF, and whatever they take it down. So I think, again, getting back to how we can improve our hybrid meetings. Sorry to say, this is not a hybrid meeting we are having at this point of time. As in, we need to be better in our hybrid modes. Because, see, if you're seeing it in hybrid, nowadays, many times the text you can also translate it in your at least major languages. Those also help in YouTube, etc. We hate big tech, but they help in innovation. Thank you.
Thanks, Amrita. Jorge, did you want to?
Do you hear me? Yes. Jorge Cancio, Swiss government again. So just two short points on the languages, and as we are talking about the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines, I don't think you've mentioned it, or Everton has neither mentioned it, but it's important to mention that they are available in about 10 languages, 9 languages. Well, surely 10 will be forthcoming, amongst other in the UN and the official UN languages, so Arabic, Russian, Chinese, English, French, Spanish. We have it also in Portuguese, in German, in Italian, so Japanese, and there's already talk of translating into some languages in Nigeria. So that's very useful, I think, but my Brazilian friends are too modest to say it loudly, but we should, because that's very useful to apply them also at the local level, because they are also useful at the local, at the regional, at many levels. And in fact, the IGF could invite the NRIs to consider them, to see where they can be applied, or where inspiration can be drawn from them. And of course, it would be a bit weird to invite others but not walk the talk ourselves. I think many BPFs, policy networks, dynamic coalitions, they already are producing outputs. So they are already striving for developing recommendations or best practice examples. So maybe I'm very naive, but I think it would be easy to take a look at what they are doing, how they are doing it, and compare with the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines. Perhaps they can improve 1 point or 2, or maybe they already do everything perfectly. That's possible. But at least I think we are going to have a conversation in some also national and regional NRIs, how we can look into that, and whether we, for instance, do our call for issues in a way that is consistent. Thank you.
Thanks, Jorge. Renata, you wanted to respond, and then I think we're close to.
Well, just to share another experience initiative that we started in CGI the organization of the Fórum Lusófono da Internet Lusófono. Lusófono is okay in English? Portuguese speaking, okay. Fórum of Portuguese speaking of Internet, I know, governance of Internet, I don't know how to say that. But it's interesting because we are bringing together all the countries that speak Portuguese to discuss the governance of internet. We made the first edition in São Paulo in 2023, and this year in Cabo Verde, in August, September, I don't know. And we are going to have the next one in Mozambique, and this is another regional forum, and there is no regional approach, but there is a linguistic approach where we discuss how to improve the language and Portuguese on the internet. So that's another interesting thing, this is a work in progress too, because we are inventing new things. And this is important to achieve this goal that we need to have more people together on the governance space debating these things, and so let's be creative.
Thanks, Renata. Everton, was there a comment online? Yep.
Thank you, Annelise. We have 3 comments, or maybe some more. One from Mike Nelson, that at IGF USA they have organized some very exciting and lively debates over the years. Thank you, Mike. One from Jordan Carter, that non-state stakeholders do sometimes fund the IGF Trust Fund, and maybe more can be done. And another one from Avery Doria, that the suggestion to decrease the number of sessions has been made almost every year of the IGF, if she recalls correctly. Many, however, feed the many sessions a rich resource that can be used long after the 4-day meeting is over. It needs to stop thinking of the IGF as once-a-year event. We have some intersessional work, but the notion of ongoing works is still foreign. So the MAGS is still a program committee for once-a-year conference. And there is also one more comment here, that improving hybrid would be a really cool idea. And so one comment by Pedro Lana, and a comment about a guide to hybrid events by Kiki.
Thank you.
Those are the comments.
Apparently there is a guide to hybrid
audience.
events, so
Thank
we
you.
will take note of that. So we're almost out of time, but I did want to just quickly ask all of our speakers, in 30 seconds or so, having heard the discussion today and having your own ideas, if there was sort of one thing that you could do for the next IGF or for future IGFs, like one concrete idea, what would it be? What do you think needs to happen? Any volunteers? Should we start with you, Jorge, and just go around the table? Or should we start this way? We'll go with Amrita first.
Next year is important, more strategically focused IGF.
More strategically focused program? Yep.
Program and IGF to achieve the end results we want to achieve in WSIS Plus 20.
Yep. Plantina?
After the discussion we just had on language and hybrid, I think improve that to make it more inclusive of attendees that are unable, participants that are unable to attend in person.
Oh my God, it's so difficult to choose one, but I would choose maybe, because I agree with Rita, this is a very strategic IGF. Maybe we can start earlier with some kind of consultations regarding what we want to achieve with WSIS Plus 20. Let's put something on the net and listen to the community before the IGF starts. Maybe it will be something interesting to put some guidelines on the São Paulo Net Mundial guidelines in, I don't know.
So I'm going to go back to my earlier point. I think the one thing I'd love to see is a focus on cataloging and making usable and useful the rich data set that is all of the IGF archives that we have.
So I vote for a bot that makes that accessible. And apart from the bot, I think we need an IGF in Oslo that is relevant, that shows that this community delivers on the vision, and that we are ready to update it to make it fit for purpose.
Thanks, Jorge.